What's up, Flaniverse? Back for Week 12 Monday Night Football, 49ers and Panthers. Adam and I will be going position by position, starting with quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, and kickers. We'll be taking questions as we go. Adam, I have run the Sims. I believe you have run the Sims. But before we get into this game, how did yesterday go for you?
Annoying, really fucking annoying. I just played like single entry stuff yesterday, but FanDuel, I kind of knew that I was screwed pretty early. It was like my FanDuel lineup had pieces you had to have, like Wandale Robinson, that my DraftKings lineup didn't. And then my DraftKings lineup had Caleb Williams throwing touchdowns to guys that I didn't pair him with. But the big one was like I really wanted to get to JSN. I don't know why I didn't make sure I got to him on FanDuel, but I did on DraftKings. And so and he's sub 10% owned. So obviously that starts amazing. And then he just gets buried by 45% owned Jahmyr Gibbs anyway. Like I'm on Ross St. Brown. I went JSN. Like with how those two did, you assume that like that works really well against the 45% owned Jahmyr Gibbs, but just absolutely buried there. So bubbled the $100 single entry for basically the third week in a row, which is also really annoying. But with 187 points, which like obviously, people say stuff like, oh, I scored so many points and didn't cash, blah, blah, blah. But like that's an objectively crazy score, I think, to just not cash a tournament.
That is true. That is a big score. But like, it was like you needed Jahmyr Gibbs for anything. Like I did one 555 Millie Maker lineup, and I think I would have cashed if I had just had Jahmyr Gibbs instead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just like that. That was like the difference is 45 points. I don't know what the actual difference was. But I think I couldn't have afforded. I think Jahmyr Gibbs was like 8,500. So, and I had just 8,000.
Gibbs was 83.
Okay.
On DraftKings, Gibbs was 83. St. Brown was 8K. And St. Brown scored like 32 and lost by 25.
Yeah. 26. Which I think that would have been enough to cash, but I wasn't going to do any damage anyway. But obviously that's like $900 if you cash is kind of a big deal. So
Yeah. And it's one of those, like, I mean, obviously, like people on Twitter all the time, complain when chalk does well. And it's not that like, I mean, sometimes there's chalk where it's just like, I don't even understand why people were playing that guy. Yeah. That's clearly not the case with Gibbs or like any of the massive chalk pieces that did well yesterday. But like, it's just so much easier to win tournaments when some part of that doesn't do well and 35% of the field loses out than when multiple the winner in the $100 single entry yesterday, I think, had 5 players that were at least 33% owned. It had the Browns defense, it had Gibbs, it had Wilson, it had McBride. I think it might have had St. Brown. I don't remember. Oh no, it had Emmanuel Wilson. And then I think it had Brissett. I think it had Brissett at like 20% also. I don't remember for sure on Brissett. But it was just one of those where like it was clearly a really good lineup. Like it was likely to succeed. It had really good players. But it was just one of those where it's just like, if that is the type of lineup that's going to win, like I'm never going to be close.
Yeah. It was, I think, my most painful NFL Sunday. I mean, in recent memory, at least for this season, probably most of last season, also mostly because of the eliminator. I told you, like my first look at the slate was like, oh man, I love Hunter Henry this week. Like I was all over Hunter Henry. And then on Wednesday, reading through my eliminator opponent was like, oh, he drafted one tight end and he somehow made it this far with one tight end. But this week he has Hunter Henry playing against the Bengals. It's funny, my quarterbacks. So I got 28 fantasy points out of Dak Prescott. Outscored his quarterbacks by 10. It's like, which I never. He had Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and we both had JJ McCarthy, and he had Geno Smith. So that was insane.
People that don't know, he had 4 quarterbacks, including Allen and Mahomes. So like, if you go in, if all you know about the week is that you win at quarterback, you probably advance.
Yeah, 100%. I would have thought I would advance. And then the other funny thing, so I outscored him at quarterback. He outscored me at tight end, where I had Trey McBride and Cade Otton, and he had just one tight end. He only drafted one tight end, and it was Hunter Henry. So and then of course he had Michael Wilson. Now that he's like relevant and a superstar, suddenly outscored my CeeDee Lamb, and just like everything was like it was the most frustrating. Like, and my lineup like did well enough, just like happened to come up against a juggernaut in like the ideal week for that juggernaut.
Yeah, it was an insane team. It was like the guy had a team that like he would have drafted this week in like a 1 week format.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like perfect for this specific week. Like this team was built to beat me in this week, and then like I would have beat him last week, probably the week prior to that. Certainly would have expected to beat him in week 14 when he won't have a tight end.
And we don't mean like it was built for this week in the sense that like he optimized for week 12 like was
right. Yeah.
game stacking and stuff. Like he just nailed like every single injury that is relevant right now.
Every single one of his players benefited. Chris Godwin came back for him, which also hurt my K. Dotton. He almost got Jaden Reed back, which would have just been, I mean, it didn't matter because he just got everything he needed. Had Rashee Rice, like carried Rashee Rice through the first 6 weeks. And it was kind of for the same reason that my team did well, because he had JSN and Jonathan Taylor, who just like carried you through all those weeks, carried CeeDee Lamb for me. And then also Rico Dowdle and some of those late. It was just, yeah, that was super frustrating. And that's like, for anybody who doesn't know Eliminator, like we're down to the final 96 teams remaining this week out of 196,000 to start. So like the payments would have been 5,000 if I won this week, and then 10,000 the following week, and just like payments getting to the point where it's like exponential, huge money. And to get knocked this week with I have kind of a powerhouse team, super painful for me. Jack, I might just ban you. Kind of obnoxious. We'll talk about what we want to talk about when we want to talk about it. All right. We will get into this slate, though. I don't think I have anything else to say other than that sucked. That sucked yesterday. And also I played all of the Patriots. Like that was my big angle yesterday, was love Hunter Henry, also love all the other Patriots, and the rest of them just sucked. Like it was just really bad. They lost 2 offensive linemen throughout the course of the game. Yeah. All right.
Let's get into one other thing, and it's I mean it has to do with DFS in general. I don't know what to make of Michael Wilson. Like, to me, I was thinking about it going into yesterday, like when I was trying to, like project him and everything. Like he was 4,800 on DraftKings, obviously a really good play there. I think he was like 63 on FanDuel, which was still good. But like on the one hand, it was really easy to just look and you'll be like, oh, well, with Marvin Harrison out, he's clearly really good and really good play, blah, blah, blah. But like, are we just assuming he's better than Marvin Harrison now? Like Marvin Harrison never does this shit.
And Michael Wilson has been in the league for a while and has never been good. So, yeah, I think it's Jacoby Brissett, just a strong connection there. I don't know what to make of it. Yeah, I don't envy people who have to do projections. I'm just going to play the ownership angle, I think, in the short term with Michael Wilson, because
yeah. I mean, like I'm fine that I didn't play 40% of Michael Wilson because like there was a million good wide receivers yesterday, but it's more just like from what is Marvin Harrison, what is Michael Wilson? Why was Michael Wilson never? Like, if he's this talented, why has he not ever stepped up and, like, just started earning targets for the Cardinals? Even with Harrison there. Like, they're available. He runs – this isn't somebody that went from running, like, 30% of routes to 90. He has been running all the routes all year long.
It's obnoxious. It's obnoxious to see Michael Wilson suddenly crushing now with Jacoby Brissett. But I guess it seems to be at least somewhat real. Like, if they're going to focus on him like that, then probably with Jacoby Brissett rising – it's – all right. Quarterbacks for this slate, we have Brock Purdy is back. I think he was back last week for the 49ers. Bryce Young, let me look at my player exposures at quarterback. Purdy, I mean, we're projecting for 62% flex, 20% cap and ownership. That seems way too high for a $10,000 quarterback. I'm getting to 48% flex, 6% captain. I assume it's similar for you.
43 at flex, 5 at captain. Like, I don't know if this ownership will hold. It seems like a lot. Kind of looking at some other places, it's similar. They have similar ownership projections, so maybe it will hold. But it does seem like a lot. Not a knock on Brock Purdy as a player at all. Obviously, he's good. He has plenty of guys to throw the ball to. It's a solid matchup. All of that is true. But he's not a rushing quarterback anyway. He's a quarterback that has been dealing with turf toe all season long. So even if he was a rushing quarterback, you would kind of assume that he's probably looking to run a little bit less. Like, yeah, he's good. He projects well, but there are plenty of other good players you can get to. Obviously, you have McCaffrey, who's the highest projected guy on the slate. So it's not even like you're talking about a non-rushing quarterback who does have the highest projection on the slate, because that's McCaffrey. So yeah, I mean, he's clearly a good play, but I think the ownership's a little high. I have 43% at flex. I have 5% at captain. I'm okay with that.
Both of these quarterbacks are similar to me in like when I'm trying to figure out, can I play them unstacked or like with just one pass catcher, in that neither of them rushes for that many yards, but like Purdy rushed for 5 rushing touchdowns last year. Bryce Young rushed for 6 rushing touchdowns last year. Like both of them are capable of running a little bit. Like when they need to, they'll run it in the red zone. So like sort of viable, I think, without without pass catchers are almost viable without pass catchers in the flex, and then maybe just one pass catcher is viable in the captain spot. But it's also like feels a little bit fluky because neither of them actually rushes all that much. What are you doing as far as stacking Purdy?
Yeah, I assume that I'm stacking with both of them. Looking right now, but where I have Purdy at captain, which again isn't that many lineups. Yeah, they're double stacked. Obviously, McCaffrey counts as a stacking piece, but yeah, definitely stacking Purdy with multiple guys, stacking Young with multiple guys. And to your point about the rushing touchdowns, like both of these guys clearly fall into that like middle ground of quarterback where they're not a statue. Like they're not Aaron Rodgers, who is literally never going to run intentionally. And has very little chance of even scoring, from like the one or the two. They're not Tua, where like that the last thing the Dolphins are going to do is have Tua dive head first across the goal line. They're guys where like, yeah, they can use their legs and get into the end zone, but they're not, intentionally looking to run. Brock Purdy's rushing yards prop is 9.5 on DraftKings.
Right.
For Bryce Young, it's 6.5. Like these are not guys that are intentionally going out and getting you a 2 or 3 fantasy point floor with their legs.
Right. So probably want to stack up when you play Brock Purdy. Bryce Young on the other side, 9,200, a little bit of a price discount there, projected for 45% flex, 6% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I got to 36% flex, 4% captain. What are you doing? How much you get into a Bryce Young?
Not a ton. 33% at flex, 3% at captain. So below the field, I guess relatively not quite as much as Purdy. Like Purdy, I'm 25% of the field at captain. Young, I'm 50% of the field at captain. But below the field on both quarterbacks here, which again, I think I'm okay with. And really in the context of like how my exposures have looked in general this season, I'm happy to see it. Because if you are going to, I think these are the types of quarterbacks where on the one hand, like, yeah, they are going to be two of the highest projected guys on the slate because they are quarterbacks, but they are the type of quarterback that is less likely to absolutely bury you just because of the rushing thing. So if I am going to get away from ownership on quarterbacks, these are the types that I would prefer to do it. So I am okay with kind of how, if Bryce Young does have a big game, I'm not absolutely dead. I still have him in a third of my lineups roughly. If Purdy has a big game, I'm not dead. He's still in between half and 2/3 of my lineups. But at the same time, I do have plenty of lineups where if they just go out there and have a normal game where they score 17 fantasy points, I have plenty of lineups that just don't have them.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the same page. Like I'm getting underweight. I don't really think I'm going to change that. I'm okay being underweight on both of the quarterbacks. Can stack, like I don't think you absolutely need to stack either quarterback just given the ability to find the end zone on the ground, but typically want them to be stacked because neither of them is much of a rusher. I think that's all we really need to say about the quarterbacks. Usually, one of the easier positions to break down. Running back, maybe more interest here. I guess maybe not more interesting because it's pretty straightforward. I'll see if you disagree about this, but Christian McCaffrey, 12,400. This seems wrong. 12% projected flex ownership, 40% captain.
Yeah, that seems really weird to me too. Yeah, the flex ownership on him has to be higher. There is no chance he's only 50% owned overall. Like, right. I think he might end up being 30-40% captain. That is entirely possible, but I don't know where that 12% flex number came from. There's absolutely no way. And like you can see it when you look at the flex rate and captain rate, because again, those are the optimal rates. So like, yeah, 30%, 28% chance of being optimal at captain probably means he's going to be like 35-40% owned, but 44% chance of being optimal at flex. He's going to be like 45-50% owned at flex also. So I don't really know where that number came from, but it's definitely too low.
Yeah. I'm pulling up his season-long stats versus recent weeks. It kind of feels like Christian McCaffrey's workload has come down just a little bit in recent weeks, but let me just compare rushes per game.
It has the last couple of games, but also non-competitive games as well.
Okay. Yeah.
But like if you look at like through the last 2 weeks, because that's what really stands out. If you look at the total rushing market share for Christian McCaffrey for the season, he's averaging around 67%. He's gotten as high as 80-85% in individual games. But then in his last 2 games, it was 52% last week. Brian Robinson was at 32%. It was 57% week 10. Brian Robinson was at 38%. So if you just looked at that, it would be easy to say like, oh, the Niners are taking their foot off Christian McCaffrey, blah, blah, blah. But like in the first half over the last 2 weeks, it's still 67% for Christian McCaffrey. In the first 3 quarters, it's still 60%. Okay. I'm projecting it at like 65% for tonight. And there is obviously the chance that it goes up. But a big reason that the workload has been down has been the score as well.
Okay, yeah, I had not looked into whether that was the case yet. Yeah, I did notice that like the past couple of weeks has been down a little bit. I mean, just looking at the snap share report from the past couple of weeks, down from 96 to 86 and then 78, 69. So kind of a downward trend over the past 4 weeks for Christian McCaffrey, while we've seen kind of the opposite of that for Brian Robinson, up to 22 and 31%. But it's good to hear, at least from Christian McCaffrey's perspective, that it has been still, he's got an elite workload in the first half, not so great in the second half. Probably indicates that he still has kind of the role that we want for him, which is awesome. I mean, on the season, Christian McCaffrey has 193 carries through 11 games and 90 targets, just an insane workload through the air. Again, like that's elite, like wide receiver 1 type of workload, just receiving. And then you'll also add in 193 carries. 272.5 expected fantasy points on the season. That is how many? 24.8 expected fantasy points per game. Really tough to argue with Christian McCaffrey as being a fantastic play. 12,400, not too expensive. I'm curious what will happen when like this ownership, I think, has to change. The 12% flex, 40% captain. Even with 40% captain, I got to 36% captain exposure and then 49% at flex.
Yeah, I'm actually going to rerun while we're talking.
Okay.
With him at like 45 flex, 35 captain, something like that, just to see how much it changes.
Yeah. And then Brian Robinson, 3,400 projected for 29% flex ownership. Using that, I got to 20% flex, 1% captain. That seems like a lot of flex ownership. Like he is 3,400, which seems like a fine price tag, just given his workload the past couple weeks. Like if you just look at those 2 weeks, Brian Robinson looks like he has a pretty good workload. But if you factor in that like it all happens in the second half, I would assume you have less interest in Brian Robinson. 16 carries over the past 2 weeks, 2 targets, 12% route. So 8 carries and 1 target per game seems pretty good at 3,400. But if that's all coming in the second half, then not as exciting for Brian Robinson. What do you want to do there?
Yeah, I mean, I have 19% at flex. I have a lineup at captain. 3,400 is cheap. The thing with Robinson is like the range, the floor is non-existent too. Like we have games where he has not gotten a carry. So there is that possibility where like McCaffrey actually gets to 80% and Robinson is 0. We've seen that. I think the most likely, again, is that you're getting like 65% McCaffrey, 20 to 25% Robinson. He does, have some touchdown equity, like if he just happens to be on the field when they're at the 2-yard line or something. He is somebody they can use around the goal line. But I think that, if he is actually going to get 25 to 30% ownership, that's a little bit high. But at the same time, I think he's an actual running back too, more often than not. Again, there is some chance that he actually just doesn't even step on the field. But he is, I think usually he's kind of like your just prototypical. He's going to get like 5 carries, give or take. If McCaffrey gets hurt, then obviously he just steps into a massive role. But he's mostly you're just hoping he gets 5 carries, 30 yards, and a touchdown or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I always love playing the running back too. It's tougher when they're getting 30% ownership. Like it's a little bit less exciting. I usually love a guy like Brian Robinson at 5% ownership. At 30%, it's like, okay, not quite as enthusiastic about it, but still, like you say, like a totally fine play, somebody that'll probably be not too far off from the field. Juszczyk is a very Adam type play. You love these fullbacks. Juszczyk 1,400 projected for 6% ownership. I got to 11%. Worked out pretty well in the last game with Hunter Lipke. Like was targeted pretty significantly. We finally saw one of these fullbacks have a pretty good role here. How much interest do you have in Juszczyk?
I have 12% right now at 6% projected ownership. He is cheap at 1,400. His route rates have been up lately. Obviously, he's not somebody that you're expecting to be targeted a ton. You're talking about getting like 1 or 2 catches probably. But in recent weeks, he is up to like 45, 48% route participation. His season-long average is like 35%. So a slight bump for him. He is somebody that they could potentially use kind of, Swiss Army knife type role around the goal line as well. Certainly wouldn't be the first time that we've seen Juszczyk used at like the 3-yard line in some way. So at 1,400 in low ownership, I don't mind taking some stabs at him and just hoping that, he catches one at the 4 and scores. But clearly a small minor role overall as well.
He's been, over the past 4 weeks targeted twice per game. Over the past 2 weeks targeted twice per game. Like has a role, but it's not like it's an elite role. You're kind of hoping that one of those turns into a big play, and then that's really like you're not really expecting an expanded role for Juszczyk. So looks fine at 1,400. On the other side, we have Rico Dowdle, Chuba Hubbard, Trevor Etienne. Rico Dowdle, 10,400 projected for 28% flex ownership, 15% captain ownership. I got to 41% flex, 14% captain. That looks great. I mean, Dowdle has looked really good. This like when he's had a strong workload, and it seems like they are moving more and more towards giving Dowdle a strong workload. Just looking at the snaps for the Panthers, it's been like he came back and like they sort of tried to continue to give Chuba Hubbard the bulk of the work with Dowdle back at first. And then now the past 3 weeks, it's been 74, 78, 83% of snaps for Dowdle. How much interest do you have in Dowdle?
Yeah, I like Dowdle here. There is still the, part of me where it feels like there's going to be that game, maybe today, maybe next week, where like suddenly Hubbard's back to a 30% workload. But we're at 3 weeks now where so far Carolina is sticking to their word, where they, the 2 games that Hubbard missed, you had rushing market shares of 72 and 79% for Dowdle. And then Hubbard came back and you got the really ugly timeshare where Dowdle had 47 and then 29%, and Hubbard had 39 and 43. And then Carolina said, all right, like, look, Dowdle is just the guy. And half the time that teams say that, it doesn't mean anything. And sometimes it does, though. In the 3 weeks since they basically said, all right, like, Chuba Hubbard is the backup, 76, 78, 76% rushing market share for Dowdle, 15, 13, 16 for Hubbard. There hasn't even been any volatility in their workloads. It's just been Rico Dowdle is the very clear number one. I've said it a bunch of times on this show. If you look like over the course of a season, pretty much no running back actually settles in to higher than 70% rushing market share when you're including quarterbacks. So Dowdle's just been getting this absurd workload for 3 weeks. And you're not going to project, I don't think, like 75% again. But I do think projecting 65 to 70% is the way to go here with Dowdle. And so, there is still that, like, all right, it's Rico Dowdle, Chuba Hubbard. Like, are they actually going to do this massive split for the rest of the season? Or is it going to kind of settle into 60-30, something like that? But we haven't seen anything to indicate that it's going to change. We've seen a very, very steady 75% for Dowdle through the last 3 games. So until we see otherwise at this point, I think you have to just assume that he is the very, very clear RB1. He's also the guy that is running more routes. That is obviously something that is really important and useful as well. But even that is trending up. If anything, I think I underprojected his route participation in the last 3 games, 50, 56, and 71%. I have him at 52% right now, which is much more in line with, in general, what we've seen. But last week we saw the route participation spike up as well. Chuba was only at 16% in that game. So there is the potential for, like, with Dowdle projected for 52% route participation, 68% rushing market share. I don't feel comfortable like going any higher than that, but there is the potential for both of those numbers to just be low and him be even better. But even at those numbers, I have 45% at flex. I have 11% at captain. Puts me close to the field, slightly less at captain, and over the field at flex. I think that even though it doesn't feel super comfortable, everything we've seen just suggests that Rico Dowdle is worthy of this price tag.
Yeah, I mean, coming into the year, we kind of thought that the passing game role was going to be Dowdle's role. Like Chuba Hubbard, great year last year, but one of the knocks on him was super inefficient as a pass catcher. Like his yards per route run was really low. So he kind of looked like a regression candidate. And we've seen that obviously happen and more, where it's like he not only not involved at all in the passing game, but now Dowdle like has the elite passing game role. And then on top of that, has all of the rushing work. So tough to argue with Dowdle looking great. Looking at the defensive matchups for running backs over the past 5 weeks, this is a top 7 matchup for San Francisco running backs, top 9 matchup for Carolina running backs as well. 49ers defense just super injured right now. So great matchups across the board for the running backs. Dowdle looking great. I think these are my 2 favorite captain plays on the slate, are McCaffrey and Dowdle, and strong at flex as well. But then I do have some interest in Chuba Hubbard, 4,400 projected for 11% ownership. I only got to 6%. And maybe it's wrong of us to even think that there's a possibility that they start using Chuba Hubbard more, just given how good Dowdle has been. But they do like Chuba Hubbard in Carolina. So it does still feel like they want to have give him some opportunities. You have to think maybe he doesn't get a great workload, but they could still use him at the goal line. That kind of thing would make sense for Chuba Hubbard. So at 4,400, I don't totally hate the idea of getting into Chuba Hubbard. How much interest do you have in Hubbard?
Yeah, I have 5% at 11% projected ownership right now. So I am a little bit below the field. He is $1,000 more than Robinson. He's $3,000 more than Juszczyk. But there's still multiple ways for him to get there. The obvious one would be injury, but we don't know what Carolina does if this game turns into a blowout. It's a 7.5 point spread. You're obviously not assuming that this is a game that's just over by the fourth quarter or something. But if it is, if Rico Dowdle is just your hands down number 1 running back right now, then I would assume they're not getting him injured in the fourth quarter of a game that's over. But I don't know if they go to Hubbard either. Maybe they go to ETN in garbage time. Who knows?
Right.
So there is that potential path though, where maybe it's just not a super competitive game and they go with more of a timeshare. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes either. This is certainly the type of spot where, from a narrative standpoint too, if it's just one of those games where it's pretty evident that Carolina's not going to win, but it's also not completely over. Do they take advantage of that to just be okay, Chuba, here's a few more carries. We're not going to go complete, foot on the gas, try and win this game with Dowdle every single touch. We want to get you some more touches just because we like you and you're a good teammate, whatever. So we're going to get a little bit more of a split here. And then next week, I don't know who they play, or actually I do know they play the Rams. But next week we'll go back to our just feed Rico Dowdle type thing. There's a million ways that game script or shit that we just don't even know is happening behind the scenes does force a closer split for Hubbard. But that being said, I am not getting much of him. I still, I think, would rather get to Brian Robinson, save money on Juszczyk, not play a backup running back.
Yeah,
any of those.
I will say 4,400, looking at the workload, does seem too expensive for a guy who has 7 carries over the past 2 weeks, 4 targets. He's 3.5 carries and 2 targets per game at 4,400. It's just he's clearly too expensive. So I guess if he does come in at 11%, I'm not going to be that excited. My assumption was that he'll get 5%. Nobody's going to want to play Hubbard. So we'll see where the ownership shakes out there. That'll be make a pretty big difference. But obviously as contingent upside if anything were to happen to Dowdle as well.
I think if you're playing $4,400 Hubbard, you're leaning pretty heavily into perceived volatility that has not been there whatsoever in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah,
but probably there probably is more volatility here than we've seen, just because Chuba Hubbard isn't some god awful backup that they have no interest in. And at the same time, Rico Dowdle's been good this year, but Rico Dowdle's not Christian McCaffrey, where there's no doubt that he's just the guy from now to the end of the year either. There probably is more volatility than we've seen. But if you're playing him at 4,400, you are leaning into that pretty heavily. Even though they've shown the complete opposite for 3 weeks in a row now, I think this is actually still kind of a timeshare.
You're right.
Pretty aggressively.
Yeah, it is we haven't really seen it. You're kind of making the assumption that maybe they still like Hubbard enough. But there is the team clearly does really like him. So I think there's maybe a little bit more to it than just we haven't seen it. We have no reason to believe it. I guess the reason to believe it is just the team has said over and over how much they love Chuba Hubbard, but it has been kind of in the past tense, how much he's done for this franchise has been, I think a quote from Dave Canales was literally oh, he's done so much for this franchise while conceding that they're going to go to Rico Dowdle. So yeah, I don't know. It's probably probably wish casting a little bit. Trevor Etienne, just 4 total snaps over the past 2 games, 1 carry, 0 targets, 1 total route run. Seems like, I guess he would be the one in a blowout, potentially $400 Trevor Etienne. But projected for 2% ownership, I got to 2%. I don't have any real takes here other than it's probably not going to hit, but it'll be low owned and he's 400. So you don't need that much.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have it. I would, again, I mentioned it the other day, but like ETN is the type of guy where you do want to make sure you want to pay attention to the lineup. Like expect a lot of dupes if you just have this lineup where like ETN fits in perfectly. Even though he's only projected for 1 to 2% ownership, he's the exact type of guy where there's probably like 3 or 4 builds that make a lot of sense with him, where he just like slots in and you like everything else. And if you just look at product ownership, it'll be like, oh, he's 1% owned, so this is a really low dupe lineup, when really it's going to be duped like 200 times. He is that kind of guy to pay attention to. To Steven's point, talking about Carolina running backs not doing well in blowouts, like, yeah, running backs usually aren't going to do well in blowouts. The only reason it was mentioned was like just trying to think of ways that Chuba would even potentially get on the field. But to your point, like even then, how often are they using Chuba if they're down by like 30 in the fourth quarter? But like they could just check down to him on passes. Like just trying to think, like it's not, nobody's making a case that like, oh, if they're down by 30, then whatever running back is in the fourth quarter has value. But like just trying to think of ways that like the guy is on the field. And like we know Chuba will catch passes. ETN, certainly could catch passes as well. Like you could just get that potential out where it's like, oh, well, Hubbard, ETN wasn't on the field, period, or Hubbard didn't have a role, but now suddenly on this last drive, this drive midway through the fourth quarter, we have 4 catches for 25 yards.
Right.
Because now they're on the field.
I mean, I think the blowout would work better for ETN than Chuba, probably. Like I doubt they use him in the fourth of a blowout.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking along the terms of like ETN is the guy that I would assume is out there when it's just like the game is absolutely over.
Yeah.
I could see again where like maybe they just kind of kind of just pull Dowdle a little bit early when it's evident that like the game is going that direction. And then, maybe Hubbard gets a couple drives of check down passes and then they're just like, okay, game's over. Like now ETN goes in. Just kind of trying to like envision ways that maybe Hubbard gets on the field. But again, like also trying to play the angle of like running back on the team that's getting the shit kicked out of them isn't super useful anyway.
Right.
Other than these guys will catch passes.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to wide receivers. And at the top, I think we'll start with Tetairoa McMillan is 9,400, projected for 36% flex ownership, 4% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I got to 27% in the flex, 18% at captain. That looks great to me. Having a lot more at captain than the field. A little bit underweight at flex, which I guess I'm probably fine with. Tetairoa McMillan, strong workload. Great matchup here with the Niners. How much you get into of T-Mac? He doesn't like being called Tet.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot as well. I think the captain ownership is just kind of surprisingly low here. Other places have it at 5-6% also, so I don't think this is just being wrong. 36% flex ownership. I have 27% at flex, but I have 19% at captain. It's just like, there's so many ways for him to get there. He's not super expensive at 9,400, basically sandwiched between Purdy and Young in terms of salary, cheaper than Dowdle. All of that I think is fine. He's a good receiver. I mean, so obviously the big question mark in his production is just which Bryce Young shows up. Like, can Bryce Young complete passes today, or is he playing like JJ McCarthy? And that obviously has a big impact, and you're just not going to know. But the matchup is solid. Like the 7.5 point spread is kind of nice, where it's one of those like, yeah, maybe they'll probably hang around, but they'll also probably be playing from behind and be throwing. Tetairoa McMillan is not somebody that has like a super high ADOT or anything like that. He's at like 11 yards, give or take, I think, off the top of my head. So he is somebody that kind of similar to like Michael Wilson's, coming in around like 9 to 11. Obviously had like 100 catches against this team last week. So he's not somebody that is just getting a bunch of like bombs down the field and they're probably going to fall incomplete. So I like him a lot here. I think there's different ways for him to get there. And then also when you're thinking about it from the captain angle, it's not like there are good players on this slate, a lot of them, but it's not like a superstar heavy slate, if that makes sense. Obviously you have McCaffrey. He's at a different price entirely. But like Brock Purdy, he's good. He's not a fantasy superstar. Bryce Young is a quarterback, but he's not a fantasy superstar. Kittle, same kind of thing. It's not like McMillan has to beat out like CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens and Jamar Chase, something like that. It's like there's one guy that like very clearly projects better, and then there's a bunch of guys that are similar.
It's like there used to have baseball cards where they would label players semi-stars, if I'm remembering correctly. I might be wrong about that, but I feel like there were baseball cards where they label players.
Probably before I was born.
Yeah, that is sadly true. And I think we have a lot of semi-stars in this game. Like we have a lot of like players that are like, yeah, he's a good fantasy. Like people are starting them in their fantasy lineups, but outside of Christian McCaffrey and Rico Dowdle, I think like it's a lot of like you're not that like confident that you're going to get a lot of like even like George Kittle is like he's great, but he's also kind of inconsistent. And then you have Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, like a lot of like good players, but like not guaranteed to do anything. And yeah, T-Mac could certainly be the top scorer on the slate. 8.5 targets per game over the past 4 weeks for Tetero McMillan, 95.5% route participation. And like I said, this is an elite matchup for wide receivers, the best possible matchup in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed per game over the past 5 weeks. Kind of good across the board outside of, I guess, lining up out left. I'm not that concerned about that minor split. But what we'll get into the next receiver here on the Panthers is the slot receiver, Jalen Coker. This is the best possible matchup for slot receivers. Jalen Coker is being projected for, what do we have him at here? 37% flex ownership, 0% captain ownership at 4,000. I am currently getting to just 16% flex, 1% captain. I hate it, Adam. I want to play all the Jalen Coker. What are you doing with Jalen Coker?
Yeah, I'm at like 21%. The routes look good. He's run at least 75% route participation using the PFF numbers. 4 weeks in a row, 76, 79, 81, 76. He's only played 5 games. So that is game number 2 since his return from injury through now. Very, very clearly running a lot of routes. He's run more routes than Leggett in 2 of those games, including last week where Leggett was at 63%. So he's on the field a lot. He's somebody we saw produce in the past. Not getting targeted a ton in general, but he is on the field. He is arguably the number 2 wide receiver in terms of targets behind Leggett for the season in the 5 games since he returned. He is only being targeted on 0.12 targets per route run. Obviously, you would like that to come up a bit. For context, Leggett is at 0.17 for the season. McMillan is at 0.24. So on the one hand, like there's no, other than McMillan, there's no wide receiver earning tons of targets. But it is likely that you see that number increase at least a little bit for Coker going forward. On the other hand, he really has not been a big part of the offense in terms of earning targets, but he has been a big part of the offense in terms of being on the field.
Yeah, it's a little bit tough for me. I also am super biased toward Jalen Coker. He's the player I drafted the most in best ball. And then, of course, he was out for the first 6 weeks of the year. So that went terribly for me. But I do see some signs of life here. With that said, I was under the impression that he was targeted like 7 times last week. He was only targeted 4 times. Each of the past 2 weeks, 4 targets. He just happened to catch all 4 of them last week, went for 52 yards. So kind of started to show something there, I thought. Decent game there. 4,000 though in a matchup where again it's a perfect matchup for slot receivers, best possible matchup over the past 5 weeks. I guess I'm kind of maybe wish casting a little bit with Jalen Coker, and that's kind of what the Sims are telling me is that if he actually gets 37% ownership, not a slam dunk play, I think I'm going to lean into it just because I'm a big fan of the player, and I think that we're starting to see him, get that connection with Bryce Young a little bit, but obviously can fail with any receiver with Bryce Young can fail any given game. So if he does come in at 37%, maybe I'll have to hold my expectations just a little bit. I like him quite a bit better if he comes in at 25 or, a little bit lower here. I plan to play a lot of Jalen Coker. I particularly do like him at captain also, by the way. I think at 4,000, so 6,000 at captain, I think it's possible that he could have a much expanded role in this matchup kind of surpass Xavier Legette as a wide receiver too. But again, I should admit that I'm probably wish casting a little bit with Jalen Coker, just assuming that he's going to get back to the player that we kind of saw start to break out last year. And then Xavier Legette, 6,400 is the, like, so far has been kind of the wide receiver 2 here. 6,400 projected for 19% flex ownership, none at captain. I only got to 7% at flex, none at captain, or 0.3% at captain. I think it's just the price tag seems expensive for Xavier Legette, but I think he has a few touchdowns on the year at least, so you can hope for a touchdown with Legette. What are you doing with Xavier Legette?
Yeah, I mean, he has obvious touchdown equity. My concern, I mean, it's two of them, but one is that he's not a heavily targeted receiver. Like I said, 0.17 targets per route run for the season, and he played half the season without Jalen Coker. And then two, how many routes is he actually going to run here? We've seen, as high as low to mid 90s in route participation. 2 of those games were weeks that McMillan was out. But with Coker's return, like, the routes become more in doubt as well. 75, 81, and 63%. Or sorry, it was not McMillan missing. I misspoke there. But 93, 92, 94% route participation for Legette in weeks 6 through 8. Obviously, look great. But then the last 3 weeks, 75, 81, 63%, less than Coker in 2 of those. Tremaine came back last week, got to 25, 30% route participation as well. Not, that I think he's like leapfrogging Legette or anything, but what happens, does his route participation increase this week? Does it take anything away from Legette? Does Legette settle in at low 60s? Does he get back to, low 80s? There is volatility in Legette's time on the field, in addition to how often he is targeted. So, like, I think he's fine because the Panthers don't have a clear wide receiver 2 behind McMillan, but at the same time, he's not a super productive receiver at all. They certainly could look to scheme the ball into his hands a bit, especially around the goal line. Obviously there is that, but I don't really like the price for him, especially when he's more expensive than Coker, but also similarly priced to Juwan Jennings is only $600 more. Even Ricky Pearsall is only $1,200 more. So I do think that there is, kind of competition in that price range as well, in addition to just him not being particularly good.
Yeah, I think that's a good note on the decreasing route participation a little bit recently for Legette. I think the best case for Legette is just if you look at the red zone targets, like he has been. I thought I had it pulled up here. He's been targeted 4 times. Yeah, 4 end zone targets over the past 4 games. Second on the team there. 3 inside the 20 targets. Actually tied with Tedero McMillan with 4 end zone targets. 3 inside the 20 targets to 7 for Tedero McMillan. 3 for Jatavian Sanders as well. So, like, they do use him in the red zone a bit. I guess that's the best case for Xavier Legette. But there are a lot of things going against him. Like you said, it is kind of a strong range. Players not that much more expensive or less expensive. If he's at 19, I think 19% seems like okay. I'm not super excited. I don't want to be over the field at 19%. If the ownership comes down closer to 10%, then I would be pretty interested in Xavier Legette. I guess you can see here the flex optimal rate, 12.5% for Legette. And then, like you said, Bryce Tremaine came back, ran a fair number of routes last week. He's 1,200 projected for 10% flex ownership. I got to 16% of Bryce Tremaine, ran 26% of routes last week. You gonna play any Bryce Tremaine?
I have 17% right now as well. I think 1,200 is just a little bit cheap. You have somebody probably running like 25 to 30% of the routes. You do have some chance that it's more than that. There's also obviously a chance that it's less than that, but it does seem that he's ahead of Jimmy Horn now. Prior to the game Tremaine missed, he was at like 8, 6, 11% route participation. Horn was at 29, 18, 22. Last week, though, Horn down to 10%, which was his lowest of the season. Tremaine, 27%, his second highest of the season. The only game that he was higher than that was week 4 when Legette and Coker were both out. So trending in the right direction for him. Obviously, it could flip back, and maybe it's a Jimmy Horn game. Maybe they just get crushed and it's a Jimmy Horn and Tremaine game. But
Right.
based on last week, it seems likely that Tremaine is ahead of Horn now, and at a really cheap price tag. I do think he's somewhat interesting. To Steven's point, he said it's really hard to fail against a prevent defense. I just want to know who will be utilized in garbage time hurry up. To kind of reiterate, like, it is a 7.5 point spread. I don't think the most likely outcome here is that anybody is getting garbage time. It's probably just like a 10-point win or something like that. But obviously there is some chance of it, and I would assume you're getting like Tremaine on the field for those true garbage time possessions, if there are any. Not that, again, like I'm not certainly wouldn't recommend like playing for that, but it is just another out to where like Tremaine gets an extra point or two at the end of the game.
Yeah, and that's also like the case for Jimmy Horn. Is like he's run 80% of. I was just pulling up the slot route participation just in case anybody was curious, because it is such a great matchup for slot receivers. 80% of Jimmy Horn's routes have come in the slot, so he'd probably be out there in garbage time. I would guess it would take Coker out, play Horn in the slot, so that would be Horn would benefit from a blowout. I would think Tremaine 47%. But that is, not, you don't necessarily want to build for that outcome. But, with these price tags, I am getting to, with that said, I'm getting 16% of each of Tremaine and Horn as of right now. Are you also getting to a lot of these tertiary receivers on the Panthers?
I'm getting 14% Jimmy Horn also at 1K, which again, I'm fine with, just because there is kind of that uncertainty there. I think Tremaine does run more routes than Horn. Also, kind of like you were saying, with Horn running the majority of his routes from the slot, Coker is their primary slot guy. So like if they're going to take some routes away from Leggett, it's more likely that those routes go to Tremaine than go to Horn. But you could get, Leggett loses a couple of routes, Coker runs a few extra routes on the outside, Horn gets slot routes. Like it can happen, but it is seemingly Tremaine. But again, it's a 1K wide receiver that we expect to at least be on the field and isn't likely to get too much ownership. Right now projected for 9%. So I'm not too far above the field there, but yeah, I am mixing those guys in. And I think a lot of it does just kind of have to do with what we're being given on the slate as well. Like Brian Robinson is 3,400. Chuba Hubbard is 4,400. You don't have a 1,200. I mean, you have Juice Check, but other than him, you don't have like a 1 to 2K backup running back that you can mix in the lineups where you need a cheap guy. So It does kind of like point towards Tremaine and Horn. And you don't have it from the Niners either. Like Bourne is 3,600. Robinson is 3K. Like when you go down the Niners depth chart, you still don't get to that like basement receiver.
Yeah. Let's switch to the Niners then. Juwan Jennings, 7,000 projected for 27% flex, 3% captain ownership. I got to 22% flex, 4% captain. Ricky Pearsall, 7,600 projected for 19-2. I got to 18-4. Do you have a strong lean on Jennings versus Pearsall in this game?
No, I actually thought that I would get a pretty big stand on Pearsall, just looking at like how I view him compared to how it seems the industry in general views him. But I really didn't, at least right now. I got to 21% Jennings at flex, 4% at captain, 18% Pearsall at flex, 5 at captain. It's not that I have a great projection on Pearsall for 7,600. Like that is a healthy price tag. I do think that Jennings and Pearsall are closer though, because I don't think Pearsall is limited. Keep in mind, like weeks 1 through 3 of the season. Now Jennings was limited week 1. He didn't play week 3, but you got 90, 93, and 100% route participation from Pearsall, then 61% week 4 when he got hurt. Then he didn't play till last week. He came back and immediately ran 85% of routes. I think it's likely that he's running 90+%, and that you're just getting Jennings and Pearsall both on the field for, at least 85, but probably like 90+% of routes. And then you're mixing in, Robinson and Kendrick Bourne, more so Robinson than Bourne. So I do think that Pearsall is going to be out there a lot, along with Jennings. I'm a little surprised to see like a several point gap between them in some places, because I think they're similar in terms of earning targets. I think they're running similar numbers of routes. I just don't expect Pearsall to be limited here. But that being said, you're not getting any sort of real discount on Pearsall for the fact that he, missed 5 or 6 weeks. It's not like DraftKings fell asleep on their pricing and you're getting 6K Pearsall or anything like that. Like he is more expensive than Jennings. So I'm pretty flat on my exposures to them. I kind of thought coming into today, just, from looking around at projections that I'd maybe be a little bit higher on Pearsall than the field, but I'm not.
It's funny. I came in with the opposite expectation, which is all of the slappies love Ricky Pearsall. Like he's just going to get a lot of ownership because people love Ricky Pearsall. But then, yeah, you're right. I look around the industry at projections. And I'm like, oh, people like it's 2 to 3 point projection difference. Like I would project them about the exact same, I guess. Like I think that they're like they've always been a struggle for me. Like I don't have a strong read on Jennings versus Pearsall, and I think like generally people like at least best ball summer, people loved Ricky Pearsall. We're really excited about him as a potential breakout. But yeah, it looks like if Jennings is going to be projected better, then probably he's going to get steamed more. And ultimately right now it's looking like the ownership is about the same. We're landing on about the same of each of them. So I think it maybe is the sentiment versus the projection kind of evening out, and they're getting similar ownership.
Yeah. And I think it's that also like the prices are not cheap for
right.
what they give you. Like it's a really tricky one because like the Niners have just dealt with so many injuries over the last couple of years. Like we know, I mean, we had that stretch where like Juwan Jennings was the only receiver healthy for the Niners, and the dude just looked like the best wide receiver in the NFL for a stretch. So like you know what it can look like when it's good, but neither of these, and Ricky Pearsall's productive. You know, for the season, he's obviously only played 5 games, 2.15 yards per route run for the season. He's been productive, but 0.22 targets per route run for the season for Juwan Jennings, and that's a bunch of games where Pearsall was out. Pearsall's at 0.2 targets per route run for the season. If you go and look at, previous years when the team's been relatively healthy, neither of these guys are, while they can both be productive wide receivers when given the opportunities, neither one has shown that they're that like clear alpha receiver that no matter who is on the field, they're going to go out there and get 0.25, 0.26 targets per route run. They're both guys that, while they can still be productive, kind of settle into that, yeah, I'm going to get, 5-6 target, type role more so when their teammates are healthy.
Yeah, definitely true. Beyond Jennings and Pearsall, Demarcus Robinson seemed to kind of retain a pretty strong role, 48% route participation last week with Pearsall back. He's 3,000, projected for 25% flex ownership, though. As a result, I'm only getting to 5% of Demarcus Robinson. Kind of scary, but he's also like not primary receiver on this offense. 2 targets last week. What are you doing with Demarcus Robinson?
Yeah, I only have like 5% too. It's not that he's like too expensive for his ceiling. Like obviously a good DeMarcus Robinson game where he catches like 3 passes for 80 yards and a touchdown, like blows that salary out of the water. He did still run around 45 to 50% routes last week. Clearly the 3 behind Pearsall and Jennings. He ran way more routes than Kendrick Bourne did. Don't know, obviously, if that carries week to week, but there's no reason to think that's not going to be the case based on what we saw last week, where Bourne was only around like 15% of routes and Robinson was close to 50. So, like, he does clearly have a role here, but I just don't really want to play the really popular 3K guy that is going to get a few deep balls and probably not catch them. And then if he does, like, he's expensive enough where, let's say he does come down with like a 40-yard catch, but it's not in the end zone. And so he ends with something like 2 for 48 or 2 for 50. Like, that's good. You're talking like 7 points. It's good, but you probably lose to a kicker or a defense or one of the other receivers or, something. Like, it's probably not like a must play. So he's just like the perfect example of somebody where at his salary with his role, if he was getting ignored, I'd be pretty interested in playing him. And the last time the Niners were on a showdown slate, I think I had a ton of him for the same reason. He just wasn't getting ownership. And I was like, okay, maybe he'll catch the deep ball. And if I remember correctly, in that game, he dropped the deep ball or it was pass interference. I'm pretty sure it just hit him in the chest. He dropped it. But like when those guys are going to be rostered by a quarter to a third of the field, there's other ways I can go.
Yeah. DC Fantasy says the people who loved Pearsall were more ball knowers, not slappies. Slappies were more into Jennings. I don't really use slappies as a pejorative. I consider myself to be kind of a slappy. But I you are right that there was kind of 2 camps, I think, like of content creators. There were some that absolutely loved Pearsall, some that absolutely loved Jennings. I guess I don't know who I would consider the slappy pick of the summer, but there was a big camp. Yeah, I think they're actually both good too. Like, and I think they're both good picks where they were going in drafts if they just stayed healthy. Pearsall was like last year. He was a big sleeper pick among ball knowers. So we were kind of hoping for a breakout. Could still come, could happen in this game for all we know.
And somebody pointed out too that they're seeing Robinson at lower ownership, and that is what I'm seeing elsewhere also.
Okay.
If you're getting the like 7-8% Robinson, then I assume I end up playing something like 10-12%. That would be more in line, I think, with like where he should be. If you look at our optimal rates, we have him optimal 11% at flex. So like, yeah, if he comes in at 7-8% ownership, I'm more than happy to play him. It's if he's actually 25%, that just seems like a lot. And also I use both Slappy and Ball Knower pejoratively because I think most people that call themselves ball knowers are just delusional idiots.
Yeah. No, I know that you feel that way. I do. Like, I would be pretty surprised to see, like, now that he brings this up, and like, I'd be pretty surprised to see DeMarcus Robinson at 30% owned, because I don't think anybody's like clamoring to play DeMarcus Robinson. So,
well, the ownership has to go somewhere if you're only going to project 12% to Christian McCaffrey.
True. Right. Yeah. So probably that needs to get ironed out with the people doing the projections, sharing them with us here. All right. Are you getting to any Kendrick Bourne? Ran 11% of routes last week, 0 targets in that game. He's 3,800 projected for 1% ownership. I don't know.
That's such a hard sell at 3,800.
Yeah. Like, he should be 1,200. Like, he should be right in the same price range as Jimmy Horn.
Yeah, I mean, he's just obviously like he had a real role when Pearsall/Jennings were out, and that salary hasn't come down yet. But last week, and again, it's 1 week, it could change. But we saw him clearly move into wide receiver 4 role last week. 79% route participation week 9 with no Pearsall, 62% week 10 with no Pearsall, and then immediately drops to 11% last week in Pearsall's return. Robinson 45, 54, 48%. So like Robinson didn't really move in terms of his route participation. And last week, again, that was with no Sky Moore or Jordan Watkins either. So, you had opportunities to get Kendrick Bourne on the field if you wanted to, and they clearly did not care.
Yeah. We got a question from Perry Fernandez here that says, can you explain what your strategy is when playing a single entry contest? And is that the best way to build a bankroll? What are your thoughts, Adam? Because single entry has never been really my bag. Like, I prefer like having at least like 5 or 10. Like, even when I didn't have much of a bankroll, I was just playing the like $2 contest and playing at least 5 in there because I don't want to miss out on any of my players. I occasionally will hand build a lineup and just try to get to like the plays that I really love. But do you have a thought on how to construct single entry and whether it is the best way to build a bankroll?
Yeah, it's never been my primary focus either. Like, I think to my detriment. I think it's something, and I am starting to focus on it a little bit more now. I kind of like you should still be approaching it like a GPP. Like, you shouldn't play it like a cash game. Obviously, like you're going to get concentrated ownership on the quote unquote best plays. But it is a smaller field, so like you don't have to go as far off the board to try and get to the top either. But you're still going to get generally flatter, but still relatively top heavy payouts compared to like your cash games. So the way I kind of think about it is usually that I can stick closer to what I think the best plays are, and then generally can find like 1, maybe 2 like points to differentiate, as opposed to if you're playing 100,000 entry 150 max tournament, like you're kind of just, especially like on showdown slates or smaller slates, like you can kind of just do anything because it's just gonna be such a random like outcome to win. So it's kind of just you can play. You want to play closer, I think, to the things that are most likely to happen. There's less of a benefit to doing kind of like more off the wall shit. As far as the best way to build a bankroll, like everything comes down to your actual ability and what you're good at, I think. I mean, if you're somebody that has like a projection edge, the best way to build a bankroll is probably cash games. But like very, very few people in 2025 have a projection edge big enough to beat the rake in cash games. So really, it's like, what are you good at? Your competition in single entry stuff is generally going to be stronger, depending on like what buy-in. It's generally going to be stronger, like the $100 single entry versus the $15 150 max. You are going to be playing against a higher percentage of good opponents in the $100 single entry. The $1, I assume there's like a $1 single entry that I can't see. But if there's like, let's say a 1,000 entry $1 single entry, most of your opponents are going to absolutely suck. and it's going to be a great place to profit. But obviously, like, you're profiting 20 cents on your dollar or something. So it's all. I think the best way to build a bankroll really is to mix and match. Like, the thing that's really hard about it is, like, the best way to do it is to be playing, allocating some money to large field stuff, some money to like single entry, some money to like three mans and stuff like that. But like, you have to have the bankroll to actually play all of those contests at the same time, which is kind of the catch-22. So really, I think like the best way to build a bankroll is to play whatever you have an advantage at.
Right. Whatever you're best at.
Yeah. And like, I've always thought that I'm a better large field player than small field because I've always focused on large field. I think I could be a really good single entry player and probably should focus on that more. But it's really like, it's to find where you have an advantage and push it.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Yeah, just don't play DFS anymore. And paying attention to like the rake in a given contest obviously is another good thing. Like, you should like have some idea of what the rake is in the contest that you're playing. I say this as somebody who doesn't always check what the actual rake is, but I do think it's a good idea. Like, it's a good way to play the best contests.
Which again, I mean, generally though, like, means like, obviously there
are
are
better opponents when there's lower,
but it means go play nosebleeds.
Right, true.
You want the best rate, go jump in that 26K with Yuta.
Yeah, true. So it's a tough question to answer, like, what is the best way to build a bankroll? Because my approach was always like, when I had a very minimal bankroll, it was just like, I'm going to take shots at the lotto, because there's not that much you can do to build a bankroll well when you're playing, $50 a slate. So just like, I want to grow this quickly, and instead of like trying to grind my way to like 10 years from now, I'll have a, $10,000 bankroll, whatever. I'm just going to play the nose. Yeah. That's
always been my approach too. Hope that you hit a decent score in a lotto before you run out of money.
Yeah. Yep. So,
which again goes back to like, having some sort of income is really nice.
It is really nice to have some income, or just have a lot of money, I guess, are the two best ways. So single entry, I'm usually just playing the best plays that I can. Like, the problem for me is I often like I go into an NFL slate thinking I'm going to do some single entry hand builds, and I just don't have time with trying to build all my other tournaments. So I end up like being in single entry and just having a random lineup in there that I didn't give any thought to.
That's always been kind of my issue, is like, I'm playing large field. If I'm going to play large field and I'm going to play small field, I end up just like kind of throwing, like, not random, but like throwing lineups still into small field that I haven't really even looked at. Whereas ideally, if I'm playing like single entry stuff, I'm actually focusing on the lineups that I'm playing. Also, as an aside, I mentioned this on an endgame stream when somebody asked the bankroll question. If you're in a state where you can sports bet, your best way to build a bankroll is to chase sports betting bonuses and like bet props and stuff until you get limited, probably, as opposed to even trying to start from the ground up in DFS.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You can usually find other ways that are easier to make money, and getting all those promos and stuff. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Do we have anything else at wide receiver?
No.
All right, we'll move on to tight ends. All going to start with George Kittle. George Kittle is 8,600, projected for 29% flex ownership, 10% captain ownership. I got to 21% flex, 6% captain of George Kittle. So a little bit under the field here on Kittle. Not a great matchup for Kittle, not a terrible one. Let's see, it's like a bottom 10 or so matchup against Carolina. What are you doing with George Kittle?
I'm getting close to the field. I have 10% at captain. I have 21 at flex. I think he looks fine. He is relatively expensive at 8,600. Obviously, he's good as well for the season. 0.21 targets per route run. Again, this is just kind of the issue with the Niners, is Purdy / Mac Jones spread the ball around. You don't have one dominant alpha receiver here outside of McCaffrey, who's at 0.28 targets per route run for the season. And even in the 3 games that Purdy has played, McCaffrey's at 0.32 targets per route run. It's not even like it was just a Mac Jones checking down to McCaffrey thing. So all of these other guys, like, they're relatively expensive because they do have big roles. They run a lot of routes. We've seen Kittle on the field a ton. 89% route participation last week, 82 the week before that. Hasn't been below 79% in the 5 games since he returned from injury. So, like, he's going to be out there a lot. He clearly is a red zone threat. He's a good player. He's just not – they're not going to force feed him the ball because they don't force feed the ball to anybody. So that's kind of the issue at 8,600. He's going to get targeted on a per route basis less than McMillan is. McMillan being slightly more expensive, but nobody on either side of this game other than McMillan and McCaffrey has a target per route run of more than like 0.22. So a lot of it kind of just comes down to you have to be lucky with who gets into the end zone. Like you're not super likely to get there at these salaries just by PPR points. Like you're gonna need big plays. You're gonna need to run hot in the red zone, something like that. But Kittle does obviously look good. I just think the ownership is pretty efficient. 29% chance of being optimal at flex, projected for 29% ownership. 10% chance of being optimal at captain, projected for 10% ownership. I don't think there's a whole lot to say there other than like ownership is entirely in line with what we expect Kittle to do.
8 inside the 20 targets over the past 4 games. So like you said, he's used in the red zone. You kind of need that touchdown though, because he's over the past 4 games targeted 6 times per game. Like that's fine, but it's not like elite. It's not like he's being targeted 12 times. It's not like Trey McBride where it's like he can just get there without scoring a touchdown or having any big plays. Like he's probably not going to have 8 catches in a game. Could happen. Like obviously those random spikes will happen, but you probably need some splash plays. And yeah, I think ownership seems efficient on Kittle. Outside of Kittle, Luke Farrell, Jake Tonges, 600 for Farrell, 1600 for Tungus. I think it's Tungus. 4% projected flex ownership for Farrell, 2% for Tungus. I got to 4% for Farrell, basically none of Tungus. You playing either of the backup tight ends on the Niners?
I have 1% Farrell. I don't have any Tungus. Last week, neither one of them really ran routes, period. It was sub 10% for both. If you go the week before that, or the last couple of weeks, 21 for Farrell, 17 for Farrell in the 2 previous weeks, 5 and 3 for Tongus. But again, you got Pearsall back, so you did get an extra receiver there. You have Kittle running 85 to 90% of routes as well. So I don't anticipate either of them being particularly, not even just particularly involved, even being on the field much.
1 total target for Tungus over the past 4 games, 3 for Farrell. So yeah, neither of them really involved. You kind of need just a splash play to pay off, which, Farrell looks, he's cheaper and more likely. Again, 3 targets over the past 4 games. So I guess I prefer Farrell if I'm going to one of these backup tight ends, but not a priority for me either way. On the Carolina side, we have 3 tight ends, 2,000 to 2,800. Jatavion Sanders, 2,800, projected for 27% flex ownership. Tommy Tremble, 2,400, projected for 6% flex ownership. Mitchell Evans, 2,000, projected for 5%. I got to 10% Jatavion Sanders, 8% Tremble, 3% Mitchell Evans. If we look at their route participation and usage over the past 4 games, let's see, it is Jatavion Sanders has been targeted 13 times on 42% route participation. Tommy Tremble, 4 targets in those 4 games on 41% route participation. Mitchell Evans, 2 targets on 19% route participation. Who is your biggest priority? Are you playing, or are you prioritizing any of these Carolina tight ends?
I'm pretty flat in my exposures to them right now. I don't really think any are a priority. But this is one spot where I think that there is input volatility in that things could change, but we've seen a really, really flat route participation from these guys really since Sanders came back from injury. Like at the beginning of the season, you were getting a really healthy 65 to 70% route participation from Jatavion Sanders, and then Tommy Tremble was running like 30 to 40%, and Mitchell Evans was the clear third guy running between like 5 and 20%. But since Sanders came back, the highest route participation for Sanders is 53%. The lowest is last week at 39%. Tremble has a 56% in there, but other than that has been 30 to 40%. But Mitchell Evans has been much more involved. 1 week where he was sub 10% in week 8. But other than that, 36, 25, 19, 24%. So you're seeing on average Evans in that like 20 to 25% range. And as a result, Sanders dropped from like 65% down to closer to 40%. So you're seeing really flat route participation where Sanders and Tremble are very, very similar. Evans is still the third, but Evans is running more routes now than he was earlier in the season. So I'm getting to 8% Sanders, 7% Tremble, 3% Evans. Right now, the ownership projection on them clearly favors Sanders in our stuff. Looking at some other places, it looks like the same thing. I don't really agree with that. Like again, maybe you do see Sanders go run 65% of routes, but there's nothing in the last 5 weeks that suggests it's going to happen. So I'm expecting pretty flat opportunities for them, and as a result, my exposures are pretty flat as well.
When you say, I was in another window. When you say ownership projections favor Sanders, you mean that he's going to get the most ownership, or what do you mean?
Like he's showing up 27 in hours. I see him around 20 in other places.
I mean, he is also the most involved. 13 targets over the past 4 games to 4 for Tremble. But you think that there's volatility in that? Like in any given game, Tommy Tremble could just see the bump and get targeted more than Jatavian Sanders, just based on the fact that last week, Jatavian Sanders' route participation was down. I think you're right that probably it's not as clear cut as the 3-to-1 target rate that we've seen over the past 4 weeks for Jatavian Sanders. Tremble is a little bit better than 1 target per game, and then 41% route participation, right there with Jatavian Sanders. So that makes sense. We'll have to pay attention to ownership, I think, with the tight ends. If Jatavian Sanders is chalky, I don't think he's great chalk, but because he's the nominal tight end 1, but 42% route participation. It's not like he's a real tight end 1. That's fine. But
right. And I don't think there is obviously volatility in the targets as far as you're talking about a group of guys that isn't going to get many targets collectively. Yeah. But I meant more, I think there's volatility where we've seen that very flat route participation for the last 5 weeks. But if you look at Sanders versus Tremble, last week they were the same. The week before that, Tremble ran routes on 15% more dropbacks than Sanders did. The week before that, Sanders was 9 points ahead of Tremble. So you've seen them be pretty similar, but sometimes, Sanders come out ahead, other time, once in the last 5 weeks, Tremble came out ahead. I meant there was volatility, though, where maybe you get the week where Evans goes back to 10% and Sanders does get back to 60. Okay. More Sanders is the guy that is clearly the best at earning targets out of that.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on tight ends?
Seamoss said, "Is there any love for Tongus, or is he phased out with Kittle back?" I don't think he ran a route last week.
Yeah, he's totally phased out at this point.
He was behind Farrell anyway. But yeah.
Jake Hales knows what's up. All right. Defenses and kickers.
This is
Jesus.
Yeah.
I had not looked at this. Matt Gay projected for 38% flex ownership, 3% captain ownership at 5,000. I got to 78% flex, 7% captain. I'm obviously going to cut back on that if I get that. I assume you will as well.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to look at that earlier while you were talking because I saw it. The projection on him is high. It's at 11 points or something.
The guy was just fired from the Commanders. He's going to come in and automatically.
Niners kickers have been productive this year. I was just they're averaging 9.9 points per game. And the Niners do have a 28-point total here. So they do. It makes sense for him to have a relatively high projection, but right now it's higher than it should be. I do think he looks good at 5K. Again, there's just all sorts of kicker volatility in general, because it's not as simple as just saying oh, this team's going to score more points. That's good for the kicker, because it entirely depends how many of those points actually end up being touchdowns versus field goals, and then where exactly does the field goal come from. Right. So yeah, I mean, if you have to choose one, I would prefer Gay, but that projection is also going to end up being a lot closer.
Yeah. Ryan Fitzgerald is 4,800 projected for 31% flex. I got to 19. Obviously, I probably want to even these out. But 19% for Ryan Fitzgerald seems fine to me.
Yeah.
Niners, I'm getting to 7%. Panthers, 9%. Niners projected for 16%. Panthers, 11%. I would prefer to get to more of the Niners, even with the bad defense, just playing against Bryce Young. I like the volatility more in that. I think even against a really bad defense, Bryce Young can just be terrible. He is, they would say, the JJ McCarthy of the Carolina Panthers. So I do like the 49ers defense a bit here. Do you have any takes on defenses?
I'm with you. I have 14% of the Niners right now, 15%. I have 9% of the Panthers. Niners are more expensive. They're not a good defense. These are the two worst teams in pressure rate over expectation for the season. But to your point, there's a better chance of Bryce Young just showing up and playing like a blind person tonight than Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is not going to just forget how to play football. Bryce Young does it every other week. So there's a better chance. Bryce Young can play poorly against a college defense any given week, whereas Brock Purdy will not.
How much of a boost are we giving to Christian McCaffrey for the revenge game?
I forgot about that. Is it a revenge game being traded from the Panthers to the 49ers though?
No, it's the opposite. He's gonna take it easy on him.
Right, yeah.
Anything else on this game before we get out of here?
No. I will mention that I am planning on doing an NBA show on the Run the Sims channel later this afternoon.
All right, that's cool. People, check out Adam's Run the Sims NBA show channel later on. I'll of course be back for Monday Night Football as well, about 80 to 85 minutes prior to lock with news of inactives, anything else that comes out, and we'll talk about all of this once again prior to lock. So hopefully you will join me there. Hopefully we will all win a lot of money tonight. Let me know if you do. Always love to hear from you when you win money. All right, and you can join the Flaniverse Discord, by the way. There's a link in the description of this video if you want to check out the Flaniverse Discord. It is free to join. Do not fall for any fake Neils. There is an imposter out there on Discord right now pretending to be me, trying to offer people winning actions. If anybody offers you a winning action, I promise that is not me. Do not fall for it. All right, we're going to get out of here. I'll see you guys later. Thanks. Good luck.